Welcome back. Back to our top story now. The quarterly employment statistics survey by Stats SA revealed a 67,000 decrease in formal non-agricultural sector employment in the first quarter of 2024, bringing the total employment to 10.7 million. The survey shows that 74,000 jobs were lost between March 2023 and March 2024. Total number of employees declined by 67,000 or 0.6%. Former Statistician General Dr. Pali Lehohla joins us now for a conversation around these. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. Help us make sense then of, these numbers. I mean, in the main, this does dispel rather bad news for both formal and informal salaries, at least in some industries.
Yes, I think the context of the numbers is that we have not had electricity for a very long period of time. And particularly in the 3 months in the first quarter of the year, the absence of electricity had intensified so badly. So one has to take that into account as a contributory factor. But one observation that one has to make, which makes these numbers even more dire, is the fact that usually the first quarter of the year does have a lower number of people employed, particularly in retail, trade, and so on, as a consequence of a higher employment in the last quarter of the year, people who are buying for Christmas and the like. So the decline, one would have argued that could have been expected. But when we say quarter on quarter, that is the last quarter of the year and the first quarter of the last quarter of 2003 and the first quarter of 2004. But when you take quarter year on year and you see decline as well, then it tells you that the situation is dire. So the decline is real in annual terms. Well, if you think about these jobs where you have lost jobs, mining is one of those, and services is another, and community, and it's another area where jobs have been lost. Manufacturing, for a change, we see some jobs having been gained there. But more generally, the trend is a declining one. Yes.
And just, interestingly, you mentioned manufacturing there. I mean, was this a big surprise? I mean, I wanted to ask you, in fact, on manufacturing industries as well as electricity. I mean, on the electricity front in particular, the space showed no change in the same period. So what could be the attributing factors here on both the electricity sector and, of course, as you mentioned now, on the manufacturing sector?
Yeah, the electricity, one would have assumed that there is a lot of work being undertaken in electricity, even though the output, which is electricity in our households or in the factories, is low. But because of the demand for fixing and the demand for creating new activities in electricity, that might have been the driver of seeing electricity jobs not being lost. But for manufacturing, yes, it appears that there has been something happening on the manufacturing front. But the general trend, as I argued, given that year on year we have lost jobs, means that the real underlying trend is one that is downward. And it doesn't come as a surprise at all, given that we haven't had electricity and we don't have rain and we don't have many other things that would make for a working economy. And of course, given the 0.1 growth that we saw towards the end of the year, you can see that the situation is seriously dire.
And I mean, this doesn't come at a particularly good time, given the fact that we've just come from a very important election. But how can initiatives like Operation Vulindlela, that's aimed at unlocking South Africa's economic potential, help accelerate growth and perhaps shape the course of the decrease in jobs, in a sense? We know that, of course, there's an important two-day conference that is happening now around this very initiative.
Well, I mean, we have had many of these initiatives on job creation and all this stuff, investment promotion. The fact of the matter is that gross fixed capital formation has been flat for the last 12 years. And if the initiatives don't generate results, then they are hot air. And I suspect we are seeing another hot air ahead of us. You see, one of the things that really have to be asked, difficult questions, you have this kind of discussion. How many jobs are you going to create? So future proof that those jobs are possible. Otherwise, these things are just a jamboree, hot air. Absolutely. And because we don't have a system of aggregation of these things, these are things that the ministers just dream up and the policymakers just dream up. There's no evidence, there's no decent system around which they can say this is proof of concept that will make those jobs. And nobody holds them accountable about the promises. So I'm saying, since 2016, since 2013, there were these investment seminars or whatever, investment promotion, where we said there are 1.3 trillion or whatever that has been pledged. The problem is that industry pledges inventories, and the civil servants don't go and look at what is being pledged. When we are looking at inventories, we are not bringing any new money. So it's recycling things that are already there. So the interrogation and the seriousness with which we think about these unemployment problems is very faint. It's hotter.
Yeah. And I mean, Dr. Lehohla, as we wrap up our conversation, I mean, there's been a lot of talk around the government of national unity, and sentiment around it perhaps giving us the glimmer of hope that we'll see change. I mean, what are your sentiments around what we'll possibly see in that space?
Well, the parties went with different manifestos for competition. I doubt if they'll cobble a plan that is meaningful in 2 weeks that gives hope to South Africans. This is where the fundamental problem is. That the National Development Plan, which was not a plan anyway, it was a statement of intention, was not translated into a plan against which the politics would play. So the South Africa is floating in a very dangerous position where there's no plan, there's no system, there's no future proof, there's nobody who holds anyone to account. So the national government of national unity, you can see the ideas are now fighting around positions rather than really dealing with this, the grinding poverty and unemployment and inequality that we face as a country. And that this reality has received very scanty attention. If it did receive attention, you would have seen it in the gross fixed capital formation, which has remained flat over the last 62 quarters that we have had in the past. And now the quarterly labor force, the quarterly employment survey comes to confirm that. By the way, manufacturing, that it has garnered a few jobs, is a consequence, it could be a consequence of factories having closed in December. So that growth may just be spirit growth.
All right.
Spirit, yes.
All right, Dr. Lehohla, thank you so much for your time. Really do appreciate it. Of course, Dr. Pali Lehohla there just commenting on the latest statistics, of course, as South Africa continues to grapple unemployment. The total formal employment dropped by 67,000 jobs in the first quarter.